Do you hear that ringing?
Yeah, it's intense.
There's some sort of feedback going on.
Hey, how are you? Nice to see you.
I wanted to ask you something very quickly. Have you been watching the show King David?
I have not.
It's a very historic type of program. We started watching it. It's just fascinating.
Really?
Yeah.
Where is it? Where?
On Prime.
Okay. I haven't got yet.
I wonder if it would be somewhere else. But fascinating. Historical recreation. Really?
It was large and subsequent history.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for the reminder.
Okay. I was just wondering whether you had seen it or whether anybody had talked about it.
No, I think everybody recognizes that I'm an ignoramus and not really going to. This is toward you. Wow. Okay.
But they certainly make a concession to a little creativity in creating a TV show.
Okay.
And
They dramatize it.
yeah, they dramatize it, but it's still very interesting.
That's great. Well, I will look into it, though I don't get any of these special channels. Morning. Hey, how are you? Nice to see you. Thank you. Nice to have you here.
Cross-country season is finally over.
Oh, how nice is that? Tell me your first name again. I'll get it eventually. Morning.
Good morning.
Thank you. Poems. Okay. Cornucopia of poems.
In English,
In English. Good morning, everybody. Shabbat Shalom. So glad to see everybody this morning. Let me thank those who have contributed to the bagel operation. First of all, thanks to Eileen and Gary Kammer for the bagels this morning. In honor of Gary's birthday. When's the birthday, Gary? A couple of days ago. Okay, so 82nd year. Yow, you're a kid. 81. Okay, great. Very good. So thanks to Eileen and Gary, and thanks to Arthur Lavin for picking up the bagels. Torah. Need I say more? Yes. Yes, indeed. And there will be more. Okay, those of you who know Dr. Adrian Schnall know that tomorrow at 3 o'clock right here, we're going to celebrate the publication of his recent book of poems. Adrian is really a very, very accomplished poet, a member of our poetry group, and so tomorrow in the afternoon he's going to be reading some poetry, talking about it. We're going to celebrate. Maybe many of you who've known him know his, he was known not as Adrian, but as Sam by his friends. His mother emphatically did not like that name. So one day, at least as he reports it, a friend called and said to his mother, "Is Sam there?" And she said, "Nobody by that name lives here." Okay, she was feisty, I remember her. Okay, blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. We praise you, Lord, our God, sovereign of the universe, who sanctifies us through God's commandments and joining upon us the obligation to immerse ourselves in words of Torah. Amen. Okay, so off in the distance is our Torah portion for this week. And we're going to approach it. And we may get there. But next week we'll get closer. So what I'd like to do today, and try to make the case for an idea that I have about Abraham. And that is how the story of Abraham and Sarah comes to its conclusion. So what I'd like to do is to go back and to just review what we've done with an emphasis on two ideas, progeny and land, and then see what we come up with at the end. So let's begin with chapter 12. Which is the beginning, of course, of the Abraham saga. We have discussed already at least the idea that seems salient to me, and that is that Abraham and his family are on the way, on a journey, and I'm inferring that the journey had, let's call them on-the-ground materialistic reasons. Economic hardship, perhaps violence in or something on the ground that led them, and the text does not tell us why. But on the way, Abraham is called by God, and that initiates a sense that the journey he thought he was on is not the journey he's really on. He's really on a kind of spiritual journey. And I like this idea. I like it so much that you may think that I'm reading into the text, which I guess I am to some degree. And that is, we often don't know as we embark on one venture, one enterprise after another, exactly what our journey is all about. We go to college thinking we're going to become an X, and along the way, we recognize that, no, I'm not meant to be X, I'm meant to be Y. And we take a job and we think this is really the path I want to be on, and in the process, we recognize maybe there's another adventure that this is leading me toward, or some variation or modification. So I like to think that Abraham's journey here is transformed. And then in chapter 12, God makes two promises to him. The Lord said to Avram, "Go forth from your native land, from your father's house, to the land that I will show you. I will make of you a great nation." Okay? So that's the first of these promises. I will bless you, I will make your name great, and so on. But it is the beginning of the process of uttering a blessing. I will make you a great nation. Then we go down to verse 7. So let's go to 4. Having heard these promises, Avram went forth as the Lord had commanded him. Without equivocation, without elaboration, God calls, promises, Abraham goes. And then in verse 7, God says, the Lord, or the author says, the Lord appeared to Avram and said, I will assign this land to your offspring. So this thematizes two important ideas already at the beginning. You shall be a great nation, offspring, and that you shall possess this land, which is reiterated in verse 8. From there he moved on to, it looks like it isn't. Oh, I see what I'm doing here. Okay. It's reiterated in chapter 17. Let's go there quickly. We'll come back. Chapter 17, verse 8. I assign this land you sojourn in to you and your offspring to come, all the land of Canaan, as an everlasting holding. I will be their God. Okay, so this is an elaboration, an intensification. Now, not just give it to you, I give it to your offspring, not just to your offspring, but your offspring forever as an everlasting holding. Okay, so this raises the stakes of this promise. I mean, you can imagine one person, Abraham, responding to God's call and getting a promise of this scope, that the adventure you're on will continue all the way to the end of time, or at least on for an uncountable number of generations, forever. After that, back to chapter 12, we have the episode of Sarah in Egypt. She's still Sarai. And we had a long conversation about whether Abraham did the right thing or not. I don't want to go back and rehearse that episode. But it shows Abraham in crisis. The first half of chapter 12 seems to point to only salutary outcomes. Promise, progeny, great nation, make your name great, and land. And immediately the author plunges Abraham into crisis. And it's a crisis based on two different phenomena. One is from nature, famine, and the other is from societies, conflict between societies and what we might call the privations of nature. So, in a way, the atmosphere turns dark here at a very surprising moment. I mean, if I'm the author and I write the first half of chapter 12, I continue to elaborate on it. I mean, this is really one of the major turning points in biblical history. And why don't I spend a little time elaborating on it? But before we get to verse 10, the author has decided, I'm going to take another radical turn at this point, and I'm going to talk about problems. And these are not just problems. And Abraham had a sore throat, and he decided to go down to Egypt. No. Or Abraham found himself tired of the land that he's traveling on, and he decides to explore further, and he goes down to Egypt. No. These are persistent, perennial problems that all societies face. Enemies, danger from other groups, and the way in which nature does not always serve our needs. So the author is going, I think, for something very, very big here. And it's not surprising. I mean, you remember what happens after the exodus from Egypt. So the people in chapter 15, the climax of that whole episode, sing a song to God at the sea. Who is like you, Lord, among the mighty, and so on. And then immediately they cross that river or cross that sea, and they have one problem after another. The end of chapter 15 through 18. the problems of nature, the problems of enemies, the Amalekites, even the problems of human nature. They have just received one of the major gifts in the history of humankind, liberation, and they're complaining about not enough on their plates. They want to go back to Egypt. So there again, the author surprises us at a climactic moment. All of a sudden, problems are thematized, as if the author is trying in a way to mute excessive optimism, idealism, even utopianism. This is not going to lead to utopia, but to the arena of history in which we're always beset by challenges and problems. And do we succumb to them, or do we continue to push on, trying to bring into our lives those ideals that these earlier episodes promised? We went to chapter 14 when Abraham is interceding in a war between 4 kings and 5 kings. He rescues Lot. That's where Lot enters into the picture. And then he comes back and he gives gifts to the kings. Verse 21 of chapter 14. The king of Sodom said to Avram, "Give me the persons and take possessions for yourself." But Avram said to the king, "I swear to the Lord God Most High of heaven and earth, I will not take so much as a thread or a sandal strap of what is yours. You shall not say." I'm emphasizing the word you. It is not you. You shall not say that I made Abraham rich. I say this because in the next chapter, it's God who gives Abraham some kind of, or promises a reward. So I think the emphasis, just by way of anticipation, should be on you. It is not you who have made me rich. For me, nothing but what my servants have used up, and as for their share, and so on. So chapter 14 ends on a note of anticipation, I might say, or a problem. Abraham deserves some reward. He's not getting it here. In 15, he raises the question with God. Sometimes later, the word of the Lord came to him, and he said, "Fear not, I am a shield to you. Your reward shall be very great." So to me, it seems to me that the end of chapter 14 is meant to lead into chapter 15. From whom and what will the reward come? But Abraham said, the Hebrew, of course, is Vayomer Avram. So the vav can mean many things, generally and. But here, the translator gets it right. But Abraham said, so he's opposing or at least questioning God. So the vav here is, but Abraham said, "O Lord God, what can you give me seeing that I died childless? And the one in charge of my house is Damascus Eliezer." So Abraham at this point raises the question of progeny. I will make you a great nation. I imagine that this has been on Abraham's mind from the beginning. There's I and my wife Sarah, but where is the next generation? So Abraham, I'm going to say, at this point where the issue of reward has been raised, re-arouses his anxiety about when these promises are going to come to fruition. Verse 3. And Avram said further, "Since you have granted me no offspring, my steward will be my heir. But the word of the Lord came to him, that one shall not be your heir, none but your very own issue." And he took him outside. I just love this moment. God makes a promise but recognizes that he needs to back it up with some evidence. I'm inferring from this that he takes Abraham's question seriously. And he doesn't just say, if I were God, I would say, "You know what, Abraham? I promised you this. Just sit tight. It's going to come. Trust me. Then, of course, Abraham does, but God feels the pressure, I'm inferring, that Abraham needs some evidence. He took him outside, look toward the heaven, and count the stars if you're able to count them. So shall your offspring be. Okay? So he points to the heavenly bodies, I think for two reasons. One, to show that since he created the world and the vastness of the heavens, he can give Abraham a child. But also, this will be the uncountable number of your offspring. Not only do I promise you offspring, but they're going to be uncountable. That's how large they are going to be. Somebody, Paul.
Yeah, I don't doubt that the emphasis on genealogy is important here. The idea of futures of Abraham.
Yes.
But when he talked about the servant in his house, meaning Eliezer,
Yes.
I was kind of surprised that, given that, we had already seen reference to Saddam and Lot.
Yes.
Lot was his blood.
Yeah.
It's the next generation.
That's it.
He even mentioned it.
Yes.
Why?
Well, later on, when Ishmael is born, God will reassert or assert that the line goes through Sarah, though Ishmael shall be a great nation. So there is, I think in terms of maybe an open fan, that when Abraham leaves Ur with his brothers, Haran and Nahor, and God makes a promise, how is that promise, given all of those lines, going to emerge? Is it going to be all of them are part of the promise? So I think the Torah is at work in narrowing the focus. It's not Lot. It's not the generations of Nahor. It's not Ishmael. It's not Eliezer. So that as the fan opens at the beginning, it gets closed to Sarah's offspring, for better or for worse. Jim?
Yeah, I thought about what Paul just said also, but I guess it's assumed or implied that all of Abraham's family were monotheists. It doesn't ever say Lot is. I don't know that Abraham's brothers were. He's the only one that's been called upon to be a monotheist. So the bloodline, even though biologically, yeah, Lot's his blood, I don't know that he has the same, what would you call it, the same interest in the situation.
Yeah. No, I think it's a good idea, a good point. I mean, it's only Abraham, at least in the author's description, who is called by God, this God, and says yes. So that Abraham is singled out here without deliberately or overtly putting the others aside as the one who follows God. Now, this is not yet monotheism. Monotheism is one God and there are no others. Ein zulato, as the prophet will say. What we have here is what we might call monolatry, the worship of one God. It never says that it's God who calls Abraham, and Abraham responds to this call, and there are no other gods. It just says that Abraham is following this one person. It's not until the prophet says, you are God and there is none else. So this is an early stage in the development of monotheism. You might think it is Abraham is not a monotheist. Abraham is a henotheist. Who believes strongly in this one God. Of course, the author says it's the God of the universe, but not overtly. But Abraham has not said that. Yeah, Michael.
He said at the beginning that Abraham is discovering he's on a different journey
Yes.
than he thought he was.
Right.
And the way I read this is sorting out what is the realm of man and what is the realm of God.
Yeah.
And so we start out with this set of promises, and then immediately he's cast back down onto the earth,
Yep.
where there's famine and war,
Right.
and all of those things that are part of the reality of being a man
Yes.
in the realm of man.
Yeah.
And then you know, there's a back and forth in which he is sorting out what am I, and what is God, and how do I make sense out of that?
Yeah. No, I think that's a good point. So Michael's point is that let's not, and I'm going to restate it, let's not think that when Abraham says yes to God, he's on this, he now recognizes what journey he's in, and everything is going to be great. The journey he is on, as he discovers, is that there is one challenge after another, culminating, I'm going to try to make a point that it's not exactly the culmination, in the binding of Isaac. I mean, really, in whose hands am I putting my trust here? Take your son, your only son, the one you love, I mean Isaac. The rabbis make this into a conversation as if Abraham is trying to get out of it. Take your son, I have two sons, your only son. Well, there's an only son of Sarah and of Hagar. Ah, the one you love. I love them both. I mean Isaac. That's how that verse proceeds. So that this is, I think, a good example of Abraham still not fully clear about I want to say something like the complexity of the journey on which he finds himself. This is not necessarily going to be a problemless journey. If it were, if, for example, right away we didn't see the privations of nature and the problems of other people, we take this book and put it on the shelf and go read something else, because it would not be about our lives. I mean, Abraham is meant to be, at least it seems to me, a kind of paradigm for a person who follows or has some enormous faith, but it's not a faith that is not besetted by problems and challenges. It's always a work in progress. Yes, Joe.
I understand that your reading is about progeny and land.
Yes.
But I think there's a parallel reading, which I prefer,
Good.
which comes from, and you shall be a blessing, what he says in 12, and all the family shall be blessed by you. So if he was only promising Abraham that you'd be powerful, he would say, you're going to grab this land and you're going to defeat all your enemies, and you're going to be powerful, and you're going to own the land. But instead, he says to him, you're going to be a blessing, and people will be blessed by you. So I see this as maybe Abraham is the first monotheist in the sense that he intuits that he can be a blessing and that God can give him a blessing. And then, obviously, when he sees the stars, if God says, I made these, obviously, there's not a lot of other gods that could, this covers the firmament. And then later on, when he agrees that his servant can be the blessing or can be the heir, he's not exactly happy. He'd rather have it be his son, but he jumps pretty easily to my servant will be my blessing. So it feels to me like he's more of a prophet on a journey, and he thinks he can be a blessing. He thinks he can create a new religion, a new way of the world to look at it. That he can teach the world to bless him, and that if he'd like it to be his son, but if it can't be his son, it'll be his servant. And it won't be quite as good, but it's still the journey he's on, which is not one of land and power, but one, maybe land and power leads up to that, but it's one of being a blessing and changing the world.
Look, I think that's an excellent comment. I mean, in a way, Joe feels, tell me if I'm overstating it, that Abraham is a kind of prophet. He's bringing a word, a sense of how to live a life to others by being a blessing. So Joe is suggesting that, yes, land and progeny are crucial, but let's not forget the connection. So in a sense, my typology has Abraham moving in his own domain. What does this mean to me and my progeny? So, my trajectory is somewhat narrow, I might say, whereas Joe wants to open it up to Abraham's role in the others. And I think we shouldn't forget that. I think that's an awfully good reminder. I'm not sure it makes him a monotheist. A person can be a blessing or say something in the name of a God, his God, her God, which doesn't mean. But I think that's an important point, but not crucial at this point. So, let me see, where am I here? I do believe that the story ends by dealing with the issue of progeny and land. So I think the narrative arc is about those two ideas. And I guess I justify, if justification is needed, by focusing on these two things, because I think that's how the story sees its arc. I don't think the issue of blessing is thematized throughout the Abraham and Sarah story. But you're really right to keep us alert to, it's not just Abraham's story here. It's Abraham's story as playing a role in the larger society. And that's a good thing to be reminded of. And in this sense, I think the prophets could appeal to Abraham as a kind of ancestor of their concern about bringing peace and justice to a larger entity than just this people. Lou, and then Scott,
I'd like to talk about the land and progeny. Consider the land that he's been given is that they're having 2 famines in 3 generations. What kind of bargain is that? Genesis, you say, what kind of land is this here?
Yeah.
Not very good. And as far as progeny goes, Abraham is very passive in terms of making that happen. He could be telling others that say, oh, this is the way, this is the way it should be, we should, this is God, and, he's one, and, but he rejects, it's ironic that we become a nation when we're coming in, in Egypt, and when we're coming out of Egypt.
Yeah.
That's when we become a nation.
And so?
We become a nation, and it's ironic because if you think about currently, the reason why there's a Palestine is because there's an Israel, and the only way there was a Palestine was because, in 48 they decided that there were going to be 2 nations.
Let's not go too far afield here. What point are you making here?
And as far as monotheism goes, I don't think that's a model for Judaism, because if you read Jonah, Jonah's saying to the others, you pray to your gods. And so he's, even as late as Jonah, they're acknowledging that there may be other gods out there, but, ours is the one.
Yeah, yeah.
So
this is an evolving understanding of the realities that beset a people, any people, and that the idea of who God is something that is struggled for and not assumed. When you look around, all you see is plurality. You don't see unity. The idea, look, there's a God of the grass. I mean, how does the grass grow? The grass grows because some God is sponsoring the growth of nature. When the moon moves as it does, there's a God who superintends the heavenly bodies. There's only plurality. The notion that there is a fundamental unity or oneness behind the plurality really beggars the imagination. I don't see unity anywhere. And so it's in a certain way the result of an abstract thinking. Can I find coherence and unity, which is so anyway, yeah, I was going to go somewhere else, but I don't think I will. Okay, so this is a struggle. This is a good thing to see that this is a struggle against forces that in some way threaten it. Margie?
I really think he's a monotheist.
Okay, you think he's a monotheist. Good.
But I mean, he doesn't have to repudiate other gods to be a monotheist. And, think of the song of the sea. Who is like unto our God among all the gods?
There you go.
So, I think it's clear he's a monotheist.
Well, look, I mean,
Akhenaten was a kind of a monotheist, not a pure one, but there were still loads of other gods.
you can't have monotheism just by affirming a certain loyalty to a certain God. You also have to find a way to say, and there are none other. Okay, very good. Okay, so I think, Joe, you think that he's a monotheist as well. You happen to agree with her. I'm really delighted. Good. Okay, let's go back. Okay, so we have some other issues on the table here. What's Abraham's role as a kind of instrument for bringing blessing? And is Abraham a monotheist? No. All right, so we've got in chapter 15 now the promise of progeny. And if we move to verse 17, when the sun set, chapter 15, verse 17, it was very dark. There appeared a smoking oven and a flaming torch. On that day, the Lord made a covenant with Avram, saying, to your offspring I assign this land, from the river of Egypt to the great river, the river Euphrates. So, in chapter 15, those two promises are also given again, and they're given together. To your progeny I give this land, okay? So I'm trying to track the development of these two ideas. Let's move to chapter 17. When Avram was 99 years old, the Lord appealed to Avram and said to him, I am El Shaddai, walk in my ways and be blameless. I will establish my covenant between you and me, between me and you, and I will make you exceedingly numerous, okay? So the reassertion of this one part of the blessing. Abraham threw himself on his face, and God spoke to him further, as for me, this is my covenant with you. Notice this is one type of covenant. This is a covenant of promise. God is promising things to Abraham. And the logic of promises is, if you assert a promise, you have an obligation to keep it, and I have a right to be the beneficiary of that promise. Promise is a kind of speech act. It's not only language, it creates a new reality. So this is how language creates reality. You shall be the father, middle of four, of a multitude of nations, and you shall no longer be Avram, but your name shall be Abraham. And I will make you the father of a multitude of nations. I will make you exceedingly fertile. Notice the hyperbole here, right? I will make you exceedingly fertile. Make nations of you. Kings shall come forth from you. I will maintain my covenant between you and your offspring to come as an everlasting covenant. exceedingly, everlasting. Its reign shall be even toward royalty. I assign, verse 8, the land you sojourn in, to you and your offspring to come, all the land of Canaan, as an everlasting holding, okay? An everlasting line of progeny and an everlasting holding of the land itself, okay? So that the stakes have been intensified, but once again, land and progeny are interwoven. Verse 9, God said further to Abraham, as for you and your offspring to come, throughout the ages shall keep my covenant. So the unilateral covenant now becomes bilateral. God has made promises, but now he's exacting promises from Abraham. Okay, so there's reciprocity here. Such shall be the covenant between me and you and your offspring to follow, which you shall keep. Every male among you shall be circumcised. You shall circumcise the flesh of your foreskin, and that shall be the sign of the covenant between me and you. And throughout the generation, Shabbat is a sign of the covenant. Later in Exodus, here circumcision is a sign of the covenant. Every male among you shall be circumcised, age of 8 days. As for the homeborn slave and the one bought from the outside and so on, they must be circumcised, homeborn and purchased alike. Verse 15, and God said to Abraham, as for your wife Sarai, she shall not be called Sarai, but her name shall be Sarah. They both get the letter He attached to their names. I will bless her. Indeed, I will give you a son by her. I will bless her, that she shall give rise. And so the promise of progeny now moves to its next step. Sarai shall be giving birth to the next generation. Abraham threw himself on his face and he laughed. Now, we often think that it's Sarah who laughs, and she does laugh in the next chapter. But before she laughs at this preposterous prediction, he laughs as well, and said to himself, can a child be born to a man 100 years old, or can Sarah bear a child at 90? In other words, this is again a crisis besetting the furtherance of the covenant. You tell me I'll be the father of a multitude of nations. You know, God, a precondition for fulfilling that promise is the next generation. If I don't get to generation 2, I can't be a multitude. And it looks to me like generation 2 isn't going to come. And Abraham said to God, oh, that Ishmael might live by your favor. So this is this idea that Abraham is committed to this process of the next generation. Doesn't look like it's going to come from his wife and him. How about Ishmael? As it was, how about Eliezer? Okay, so Abraham is committed to the idea, but he's trying to figure out how in plausible terms can this happen. And God said, nevertheless, Sarah, your wife, shall bear you a son, and you shall name him Isaac. I will maintain my covenant with him as an everlasting covenant for his offspring. As for Ishmael, I've heeded you. I will bless him. He will be blessed just as Isaac will be blessed. I will make him fertile and exceedingly numerous. He shall be the father of 12 chieftains, 12 tribes, 12 chieftains, and make of him a great nation. But my covenant I will maintain with Isaac, whom Sarah shall bear to you at this season next year. I just love the fact that the author recognizes some of the questions that this process raises. So he's being sure that though Abraham and Abraham's concubines, Sarah and Hagar and concubines, are going to have a lot of people, they will be blessed, but the covenantal line goes through Sarah, and so on. So let's go to chapter 18. So we did a little of 18 last week. It's in 2 parts. Part 1, Abraham offering hospitality, okay? And not only offering hospitality as an act, but offering it with intentionality. Because it says over and over again, Abraham ran to do this, he ran to do that. He just didn't fulfill his obligation perfunctorily or grudgingly. He does it with intentionality and purpose. And we remember Maimonides' steps of charity. Even if you give tzedakah grudgingly, it still counts as a mitzvah. You're still doing a good thing. We're not asking you to always have strict intention, because we need to get the job done. We need to fund our various institutions and activities. And if you're going to do it grudgingly, okay. We wish you would do it with intentionality and awareness, spontaneity. And so Abraham could fulfill the mitzvah of hachnasat orchim, welcoming strangers, but he does it with alacrity. So we learned something about Abraham's interiority. Abraham is not just an actor. We see his motivation as well. Verse 16, part 2 of 18. The men set out from there and looked down towards Sodom, and Abraham walking to see them off. Now the Lord had said, shall I hide from Abraham what I'm about to do? Since Abraham is to become a great and populous nation, and all the nations of the earth are to bless themselves by him. So I take back what I said to Joe, that blessing is important at the beginning, but it's not traced as a theme through this narrative. In fact, here it comes back to give it a little bit greater emphasis, which is important to note. For verse 19, I have singled him out, that he may instruct his children and his posterity to keep the way of the Lord by doing what is just and right. Okay? So God conveys two things here. The ways of the Lord are justice and righteousness, but we are to emulate God's ways. Now, this is the idea of imitatio Dei. As God does X, so too are we to do X. But God, in a certain way, has opened God's self to some criticism here by announcing that his ways are justice and righteousness. In order that the Lord may bring about for Abraham what he has promised him. Then the Lord said, one could set this chapter up by noting the conflict between the question, does God do what is right? Is God beholden to standards God's self? Or is right defined by what God does? Does what God does make it right? Or is God beholden to something else? Then the Lord's, because God has already said the ways of God are justice and righteousness, which is an opening for Abraham. The outrage of Sodom and Gomorrah is so great and their sin is so grave, I'll go down to see whether they acted altogether according to the outcry that has reached me. If not, I'll take note. The men went on there, from there to Sodom, while Abraham remained standing before the Lord. It's as if God said to him, okay, you can go home now. But Abraham, no, he's staying put because he's got something on his mind. Abraham came forward and said, will you sweep away the innocent along with the guilty? What if there should be 50 innocent within the city? Will you then wipe out the place and not forgive it for the sake of the innocent 50 who are in it? This is not justice, this is mercy. Because everyone, the innocent and the guilty, will be saved because of the innocent. Okay? So, the innocent get off here in this statement. Far be it from now here is Abraham as Prometheus. Remember, Prometheus storms the heavens, and he brings fire back from the gods and gives it to human beings. And for that, he's punished. Abraham here, small s, not exactly Promethean because he's already a believer, is storming the heavens. Far be it from you to do such a thing, to bring death upon the innocent as well as the guilty, so that the innocent and guilty fare alike. Far be it from you, and here comes the moment, Shall not the judge of the whole earth deal justly? You are known as the just one. How can you act against your nature? So Abraham is suggesting here, isn't he, that there are standards by which we can judge God's actions. Isn't that what Abraham is doing? How dare Abraham do it? And yet God, in a way, back here in verse 19, has given Abraham permission to do it. Back to 19. I've singled him out that he may instruct his children as possible. To keep Abraham's mission, vocation, is to teach justice and righteousness, to be beholden to those values, as if to say, all right, I'm going to give Abraham a little hint here. I'm going to say that you are charged with disseminating the values of justice and righteousness to your progeny. This is part of what it means to be Abrahamic. Let's see how seriously you take it. And Abraham takes it very seriously. Verse 25. Far be it from you to do such a thing, to bring death upon the innocent as well as the... Far be it from you. Shall not the judge of all the earth deal justice? Doesn't Abraham, in a way, at least at this moment, resolve that question? What is the standard of righteousness? And one alternative is, what the God does is the very definition of right and wrong. But Abraham doesn't buy that here. He is judging God, or at least raising criteria by which we can understand God's actions. It's a big moment. Erich Fromm, you know Erich Fromm, the psychoanalyst, You Shall Be as Gods. I looked for it this morning on my bookshelf. It's there somewhere. Says that this is a deeply humanistic moment. The value of human beings and thinking for ourselves on the basis of values and not just on faith or a belief in God. A belief in God for Abraham doesn't mean swallowing everything that God purports to do. It's a really an amazing moment, isn't it? And the Lord answered, verse 26, if I find within the city of Sodom 50 innocents, I'll forgive the whole place. In other words, I'll be merciful. So God is now working with Abraham on what it means to be just and right and sympathetic in this case. And we see at the end, let's not go through the entire thing, verse 31. And he said, well, no, let's go back a little bit. So verse 27, and Abraham spoke up, saying, here I venture to speak to my Lord, I who am but dust and ashes. Don't you love it? I mean, to me it can mean one of two things or both. That Abraham is really, actually deferential. He realizes the great gap between himself and God. And therefore, it takes a lot of gall to chutzpah, where in the Bible does chutzpah emerge? Right here, yeah, exactly. So is it actual humility, or is this a rhetorical ploy? You know, I see that you are really great and I'm really small. But on the other hand, let me have you face a dilemma. I don't know which it is. How many think he's actually being deferential here? He means it. He's dust and ashes. Okay. And how many think it's just a way of trying to soften God up? Okay. I'm taking names. Okay, very good, very good. Okay, so, and we get now to verse 31. And I venture again to speak to my Lord. What if 20 should be found there? And he said, I won't destroy for the sake of the 20. And he said, let not my Lord be angry if I speak but this last time. What if 10 should be found there? And he answered, I'll not destroy it for the sake of 10. And that's the end of it, right? So if there are only 8, if there are only 6, But here, this idea that 10 may make a community. Ivan?
It seems to me there's a real difference here in the interplay between God and Abraham
Yes.
than when we flip forward to Egypt
Yes?
and the interplay between God and Moses.
Good. What do you make of it?
God tells Moses, I'm going to kill the firstborn of every Egyptian.
Yeah.
Moses doesn't say, but what if there are 10 righteous firstborn?
Yeah.
You spare them.
Hmm.
And it strikes me that there's a different conception. Something is different between the two episodes.
And what do you sense what the difference is?
I don't, it just strikes me, it's a very different conception of
Yeah.
the interplay, the relationship between Abraham and God and Moses and God.
So Sodom is, Egypt is an enemy, and they threaten the very existence and persistence of the Israelites. Whereas Sodom, albeit a wicked city, is not exactly an enemy. I just point that out. That may not be the reason.
But the idea is you can't destroy the just because there are wicked around.
Yeah.
And if there were 10 just firstborn in Egypt, shouldn't they have been allowed to survive the same way that the 10 just people in Sodom should have been enough to allow the Sodomites?
Right.
It just seems to me there's a shift somewhere that went on.
So Ivan, your assumption here, unstated, maybe you won't support it, is that this is a general principle, and it has an absolutist application. Wherever there are innocents in a wicked city that God decides to destroy, to do so would be a violation of this universally applicable principle. That's one way of seeing it. Another way of seeing it is, just to say it quickly, is this is a principle with footnotes. That under certain, I'm not committing myself to the universal application of this, just in this instance, but there may well be situations in which taking care of the whole group, killing the whole group, is valid. And I think it just depends on how widely this is understood, and the text doesn't tell us. But I think that when we get to Egypt, as you nicely raise, it in retrospect can cause us to say, this is a value, a commitment that's going to have exceptions. And when you deal...
When do you know when it's a situation with the exception, and when do you know when it's the situation without the exception?
See, you don't know in any logical sense because the Torah is not unfolding logically. It's unfolding narratively. And so oftentimes we have to make an inference about principle from what is happening on the ground. I've made that inference. I'm not suggesting that my inference is right, but at least the narrative seems to support the fact that if we have the Sodom thing in mind, that there is going to be an exception. And that's as good as I could do. I mean, the other way to think about this is the Torah is really not a philosophical text. It's not trying to clarify all the issues. The energy, the thrust of the thing is not the unfolding of a logical argument, but of a narrative flow. And we find, as we do the narrative, what are the imperatives in that set of circumstances without having to be beholden to how things happened in the past. That's just an attempt to make sense of it. I don't know. Maya?
On a different note, what Joe said, Orla Boy, the motif,
can't we just see this example as God is examining Abraham if he is just enough in order to be born again?
Okay, very good. Good. So that Maya's point here is that this is less about the principle or the reality of the destruction, but really who does Abraham show himself to be? And you're suggesting that God, I take it you're suggesting, that God is pleased that Abraham is talking back, challenging God. This is a different kind of heroism. When God said at the beginning, go, Abraham could have said, what do you mean go? I'm working with my family here. And so there he assents. But so assent is part of the faith journey. But also resistance is part of the faith journey as well. That's a lesson I learned from it. I mean, we've seen a very bold Abraham throughout. From the chapter 12, Sarah in Egypt, for better or for worse, he steps forward boldly. So he's a person of faith in a complex way. Lynn?
In regards to killing the firstborn, God didn't do that right away. He did 9 other efforts to stop the Pharaoh and have the Pharaoh let them go. It was only when nothing would work and the fact that he tried 9 other plagues is why he went to do this. And it might have something also to do with God feeling he was not acknowledged.
That what? That God, what did you say?
That Pharaoh did not acknowledge the greater God.
I see what you mean.
But he tried 9 times without killing.
That's really a wonderful comment. I mean, we can't treat the destruction of the Egyptians in isolation, is your point. That at least 2 things have become a problem. One is God tried many other ways to do it. Well, and that's a compliment to God, who was not really just intent on wiping out the firstborn, but let's see if we can get some conciliation here. We can get some leeway in Pharaoh. And when it doesn't happen, he pulls the big one. And the other point you make is that Pharaoh doesn't acknowledge God. I think that is less problematic. I think that, to me, that is being addressed to the reader, and not so much to Pharaoh, who has no obligation to believe in Abraham's God.
Wasn't he trying to prove that he was the powerful one?
Definitely, yes, he was trying to prove it, but that Pharaoh needed proof is not really a criticism because Pharaoh has his own religion.
Well, I'm not saying it's a criticism to why God did what he did. I'm just saying that maybe it was twofold.
Maybe it's, okay, very good. David?
Yeah, to Ivan's point here, I think you've got 2 different stories going on, and God's judgment, the quality of the judgment, is evolving from Genesis to Exodus. You have a story where there's male genocide that initiates this, and to make some equivalency between what happened in Sodom and Gomorrah and say, well, let's look for 10 just Egyptians. It just, I think you've got different authors writing as well here. And, to God's sort of character, we also learn that God says, hey, listen, we have to weep after I've killed all these Egyptian soldiers. These are my human beings as well. So I think we're seeing a changing God personality in terms of his judgment.
You think we're seeing a changing in God's personality and not a change in the... You've made a strong case, as has Lynn, for the alteration of the circumstances. I don't know that God reacts differently, but over and against the change in circumstances. Yeah. What about, so what about that, Ivan? You seem to be, yeah, go ahead, what about it?
I mean, what bothers me is if God said, well, Pharaoh's the one who's in charge and he's doing these things, so I'm going to cause harm to Pharaoh and maybe his family, that's one thing. But when you go back to Exodus, it's not just the firstborn of Pharaoh and his family who are killed. It's the firstborn of the slaves
Yeah.
and the firstborn of
All the firstborn.
Egyptians in the dungeons. So the punishment went far beyond the people in control of society who were causing the harm and causing the threatening
Nice.
to the society.
So I think what all of you are suggesting is that the circumstances are different enough, the lead up to the ultimate crisis, that different approaches by God seems to be explainable, if not fully justified.
But, right, because again, I can understand the punishment of the officials in Egypt who created that system that oppressed the Israelites.
Mhm.
But what bothers me is the punishment of the downtrodden Egyptians.
Yeah,
I think
exactly.
the text says the firstborn of the Egyptians in
Sure.
jails were killed.
Yeah.
Firstborn of the slaves were killed.
Yeah,
So it seems like it just went too far.
Russell?
Good luck, topic. I was wondering whether this number 10, which God showed mercy and recognized them, is the reason we have 10 people in a million instead of like 12, one for each tribe.
Yeah.
Is there any connection with that?
Well, what is 10? I mean, in the decimal system, so to speak, multiples of 10, right? 10 seems to be a kind of magic number, but I don't know how much I could. 5 and 5. 5 and 5. Yeah, that could be, although I've never really seen a discussion about it in that sense. Okay, Arthur, I'm going to try to get to the end of the story today. I don't have anything to do until 3 o'clock this afternoon. What about you guys? Arthur?
So I'm curious about, we're talking about what's Abraham's role in the story. And what's interesting to me is he retains an important role, certainly in Islam. I think in Christianity, I don't know so much about that.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
More so than Moses. Moses, he's interceded by the...
Abraham is a man of faith. Moses brings the law, justification by faith.
So something about Abraham's character that inspires not just us, but our brother and sister religions. And so I think that's powerful. And the other is that this question of questioning God. So it's interesting to me how that changes depending on the situation.
Yeah.
Abraham's challenge is different than Jacob's. Jacob wrestles, but we don't know that there's what the point of the wrestle is.
Yeah.
It's not like they're having an argument. They're just physically wrestling. And then you have Jonah's struggle, which is repudiated. So struggles have different flavors, which I love about the narrative. It's just struggles with the character, and it's an interesting character in different situations.
Right? Yeah, the author or the editor isn't committed to a certain set of narrative givens. In a way, allows the narrative to unfold in some kind of natural way. I mean, look, one could summarize the interest in Abraham in Christianity and Islam. Abraham, as I just said, is a person of faith, and he believed in him, and God proclaimed, "You're righteous," righteousness by faith and not by the law. Paul's notion that it's not the law. Islam, Ishmael is his offspring, and through Ishmael comes the Arabs. So I think that doesn't explain it. Yes?
Curious about where does God draw the line between innocent and guilty?
Yeah. You mean what makes a person guilty?
Is it absolute?
Uh-huh.
Is it your thoughts should be wicked, but you don't
There you go. In any event, it seems heinous enough, whatever the definition. This is not jaywalking. But we don't get a definition of it. And I think you make a good point. Is it only act or is it also motivation? And we just don't know in this case, I think. It's just trying to make the point about the innocent and the guilty and what God's reaction are going to be. And is he going to punish only the guilty or... So, Margie,
My
that,
comment on it, I find it is that the God in Egypt, that God is the liberator God, and we have it in our Ten Commandments. God who brought us, the God who cares about freedom, and in this context of the story, there would be no Exodus without the 10th plague, and that's our meta narrative for Western civilization and Judaism.
you mean the liberation from Egypt?
Yes, God as a liberator.
God as a liberator.
That story, which is quite different from this story.
Oh, that's, okay.
We wouldn't have the Exodus.
Okay, that's a very good point. Leads to liberation theology, for example, and so on. One more, and then I'm going to go back, because I want to try to bring this arc to a kind of a conclusion. David?
Early in Genesis, God wipes out everybody because of the bad behavior. And here, God has learned that wiping out everybody is not necessarily the right idea. But this is an issue of when should an entire civilization be destroyed?
Yeah.
What justifies that? In the case of the Exodus from Egypt, there's a more delicate problem, and it's the problem that we face always in wartime, which is how can you have a war without killing innocents? It's impossible. And so the question is, what do we do about the fact that in war, innocent people are going to suffer and die?
Yeah.
And we have to address that problem. And that's why we have a more nuanced system where we say, okay, we understand that innocent people are going to suffer in certain circumstances, and our obligation is to minimize that.
Right.
But not to say that because the innocent may suffer, we can't act.
Right. The sort of the oxymoron of the ethics of war. Yeah. There's a right and a wrong way to go after people. Yeah. Let's go. I want to move on a little bit. I know there's still some questions, but let's see what we're going to do here. Okay, so now I want to move. Isaac is born in chapter 21. He's circumcised. Now I want to move to 22. So, some famous chapter. We read it every Rosh Hashanah. Sometime afterward, God put Abraham to the test. He said to him, Abraham, and he said, here I am. Take your son, your favorite one, Isaac, whom you love. Go to the land of Moriah and offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the heights that I will point out to you. In other words, go and bring a halt to the unfolding of your line to whom I gave the promise of generations. So early the next morning, Abraham saddled his ass, took with him 2 of his servants, his son. He split the wood for the burnt offering. He set out for the place of which God had told him. On the 3rd day, Abraham looked up and saw the place from afar. Then Abraham said to his servants, stay here with the ass. The boy and I will go up there. We will worship, and we will return to you. Abraham took the wood for the burnt offering and put it on his son Isaac. He took him the firestone and the knife, and the 2 walked off together. And Isaac said to his father Abraham, Father, and he answered, yes, my son, Hineni, here I am. And he said, here are the firestone and the wood, but where's the sheep for the burnt offering? I mean, this is a masterpiece of narrative unfolding, isn't it? building tension. And Abraham said, God will see to the sheep for his burnt offering, my son. And the two of them walked on together. And they arrived at the place of which God had told him. Abraham built an altar there. He laid out the wood. He bound his son Isaac. He laid him on the altar on top of the wood, and Abraham picked up the knife to slay his son. Then an angel of the Lord called to him from heaven, Abraham, Abraham, and he answered, Here I am. And he said, Do not raise your hand against the boy or do anything to him, for now I know that you fear God, since you have not withheld your son, your favored one, from me. When Abraham looked up, his eye fell upon a ram caught in the thicket by its horns. So Abraham went and took the ram, offered it up as a burnt offering in place of his son, and named the place Adonai Yireh, whence the present saying, On the mount of the Lord there is vision. Adonai Yireh, or Yera'eh. The angel of the Lord called to Abraham a second time from heaven and said, By myself I swear, the Lord declares, because you have done this and have not withheld your son, your favored one, I will bestow my blessing upon you and make your descendants as numerous as the stars of heaven and the sands on the seashore, and your descendants shall seize the gates of their foes. All the nations of the earth shall bless themselves by your descendants because you have obeyed my command. And Abraham returned to his servants, and they departed together for Beersheba. Abraham stayed in Beersheba. So here's what I want to say at the end of this narrative. Abraham is shaken. Abraham wonders, in whose hands have I placed my life and the life of my descendants? Who is this God? I've escaped it. I've survived, but this God has asked me something preposterous, as if God were willing to allow the covenantal continuity to end with child 2. And once Isaac is gone, and up to the last minute it looked like that's what it was going to be, that's the end of the covenant. God made promises to me, and look where I am. So I'm thinking about, what is Abraham's psyche at this particular moment, right? We, the reader, recognize, phew, my gosh, what a close, and God promises because you had faith. So here's what I want to suggest. If you'll accept my premise that Abraham is shaken to his core at this moment. So what happens in chapter 23 and 24, the next two chapters? 23, Abraham purchases a piece of land where he's going to bury his descendants. The first piece of land owned, not just promised, to Abraham and his descendants. In chapter 24, Abraham sends his servant out to get a wife for his son. So here's my suggestion. Abraham, shaken at this moment, but still committed to the promises, recognizes that though God may still fulfill these promises, he's got to do them himself first. It's not accidental, it seems to me, that each of the next two chapters deals with one of the two themes we've been tracing from the very, very beginning: progeny and land. And Abraham does both without the help of God. So we have seen two aspects of Abraham. We have seen Abraham, the person of faith, who is willing to follow God, to leave his family and so on. But he's also an individual who takes matters into his own hands. For him, faith is not just passivity and leaving it to the God to do it. Faith means being responsible for carrying your part of the covenant out. And so Abraham is two people, a person of faith, the Akedah, the binding of Isaac's story. But he's also a person of action, who in the absence of God playing God's role, God is recessive in these next two chapters. God doesn't play a role. Abraham steps forward and fulfills the next step in the promise. Okay? So that whereas some commentators think that the Abraham saga ends with chapter 22 and that 23 and 24 are appendices, actually Ephraim Spicer, who wrote a wonderful commentary, says in his comment on chapter 24, the present narrative provides a restful interlude between the story of Abraham's life, which is just coming to a close, and the history of Jacob. For me, these are not interludes. These are not moments of rest before we get on to the next generation. These are crucial questions about the meaning of faith according to biblical religion. So let's take a little bit of look in the moments that we have. Chapter 23. Sarah's lifetime, the span of Sarah's life, came to 127 years. Sarah died in Kiryat Arba, now Hebron, in the land of Canaan. Abraham proceeded to mourn for Sarah and to bewail her. First the mourning, then Avram rose from his bedside, from beside his dead, spoke to the Hittites, saying, I'm a resident alien among you, I'm a stranger. Sell me a burial site among you that I may remove my dead for the burial. And the Hittites replied to Abraham, saying to him, Here is my Lord, you are the elect of God among us. Bury your dead in the choicest of our burial places. None of us will withhold his burial place from you for burying your dead. Sell me the land, here's our counteroffer. Take whatever you want and bury your dead there. Be our guest. Thereupon Abraham bowed low to the people of the land, the Hittites, and he said to them, If it is your wish that I remove my dead for burial, you must agree to intercede for me with Ephraim, the son of Tzohar. Let him sell me the cave. Sell me the cave of Machpelah that he owns, which is at the edge of his land. Let him sell it to me at the full price for a burial site in your midst. At the full price. Namely, nobody can say, I didn't pay what it's worth. Ephron was present among the Hittites, so Ephron the Hittite answered Abraham in the hearing of the Hittites, all who entered the gate of his town, saying, No, my lord, hear me. I give you the field. I give you the cave that is in it. I give it to you in the presence of my people. Bury your dead. I'm going to be very generous to you. You have a need, and I'm going to help you fulfill it. Then Abraham bowed low before the people of the land and spoke to Ephron in the hearing of the people of the land, saying, If only you would hear me out, let me pay the price of the land. You see that Abraham is insistent that your generosity is not enough. Let me pay the price of the land, accept it from me, that I may bury my dead there. And Ephron replied to Abraham, saying to my Lord, hear me, a piece of land worth 400 shekels of silver. What is that between you and me? Go bury your dead. Abraham accepted Ephron's terms. Abraham paid out to Ephron the money that he had named in the hearing of the Hittites, 400 shekels of silver at the going merchant's rate. The specificity here, I think, is in the interest of making it crystal clear that Abraham paid and what he paid to Ephron. So Ephron, verse 17's land in Machpelah near Mamre, the field with its caves and all its trees. This looks like the description of a deed, doesn't it? The field with its caves and all the trees, anywhere within the confines of the field, passed to Abraham. You know what, Abraham? We give you the burial site, but you said the trees and the fields. Now, that's not what we meant. Let's put it in the deed. To Abraham, so back to 17. So Ephron's land in Machpelah, near Mamre, the field with all its caves and all the trees, anywhere within the confines of that field, passed to Abraham as his possession. In the presence of the Hittites, witnesses, of all who entered the gate of the town, not only the presence of the Hittites, but everybody who came. And then Abraham buried his wife Sarah in the cave of the field of Machpelah, facing Mamre, now Hebron, in the land of Canaan. Thus the field with its cave, we already heard this. And they're saying it again, just so that it's unequivocal that Abraham has purchased the land. And what does this mean? This is the beginning of the fulfillment of God's promise to give this land to you and to your offspring. And it happens through the meticulous concern of Abraham that this purchase is crystal clear, valid, beyond a cavil, beyond any doubt at all. Thus the field with its cave passed from the Hittites to Abraham as a burial site. Okay? Abraham now, after the Akedah, gets the first promise underway in terms of its realization. Chapter 24. Abraham was now old, advanced in years. And the Lord had blessed Abraham in all things. And Abraham said to his senior servant of his household who had charge of all this, put your hand under my thigh, and I will make you swear by the Lord, the God of heaven, the God of earth, that you will not take a wife. This is the next thing that is immediately on Abraham's mind, the next generation. As we know, a number sequence is already complete with two numbers, 1 and 2. Unity and plurality. So the key is to get to number 2 so that the succession is now underway. That's what Abraham is doing. That's what the author has forced upon Abraham, to get the process underway. God took care of the first number 1. Abraham's taking care of number 2, etc. I think is the implication, at least, that I would like to draw. And verse 3, I will make you swear by the Lord, the God of heaven and earth, that you will not take a wife for my son from the daughters of the Canaanites among whom I dwell. Okay? Requirement number 1, don't have him come from the indigenous folk, because we have our own line. But go to the land of my birth and get a wife for my son Isaac. Now we know why. Before Abraham was called in chapter 12, the author at the end of 11 talked about Abraham's brothers and the rest of the family. Now they're coming back. Now we're having another Nahor, the brother of Abraham, and Nahor's descendants. So the author has set this up even before he called Abraham. And the servant said to him, what if the woman doesn't consent to follow me? Shall I then take your son back to the land from which you came? And Abraham answered, on no account must you take my son back there. And the Lord, the God of the heaven, who took me from my father's house, from my native land, and so on, I will sign this land. He will send an angel before you. And so the servant goes on his journey. Let's look at verse 13, where the servant on his way lifts his head and prays to God. He said, O Lord God, God of my master Abraham, grant me good fortune this day and deal graciously with my master Abraham. So the servant here is bringing God back into the picture, but not as the agent of fulfilling this promise, but as someone who is going to bestow God's blessing and will have something to do with actually what happens. Here I stand, verse 13, by the spring as the daughters of the townsmen come out to draw. Let the maiden to whom I say, please lower your jar that I may drink, and who replies, drink, I will also water your camels. Not just do what I ask, but get the spirit of what I ask and offer more. Don't just give me drink. No, I will not. You want me to give you something to drink? Yes, but I'm going to do more. I'm going to water your camels too. Doesn't that remind you a little bit of Abraham running to bring a repast for the strangers? Drink, and I will also water your camels. Let her be the one whom you have decreed for your servant Isaac. Thereby shall I know that you have dealt graciously. He had scarcely finished speaking. You see, that's just that Vayehihu terem kila lidaber. He had scarcely finished this when it's in motion. When Rebekah, who was born to Bethuel, the son of Milcah, the wife of Abraham's brother Nahor, came out with her jar on her shoulder. The maiden was very beautiful, a virgin, whom no man had known. She went down to the spring, filled her jar, and came up. And the servant ran toward her and said, "Please let me sip a little water from your jar." "Drink, my lord," she said, and she quickly, who does that remind us of? That's Abraham. Quick, get the meal and get the bowl, okay? So she is Abrahamic in terms of her value system, which is one way of saying she's the right person. Of course, was it an accident that the servant says to God, "Let me get the right person," and behold, immediately. So God is back in the picture, in a way, hovering over an episode initiated by Abraham. "Drink," verse 18, "my lord," she said, and she quickly lowered her jar upon her hand, let him drink. And when she had let him drink his fill, she said, "I will also draw for your camels until they finish drinking." Quickly, vatamaher, the same verb used for Abraham, quickly emptying her jar into the trough, she ran back to the well to draw, and she drew for all, she didn't draw for his camels, she drew for all his camels. Now, verse 21, to me, is one of the most powerful verses in the entire Bible. The man, meanwhile, stood gazing at her, silently wondering whether the Lord had made his errand successful or not. Now, isn't that a great moment? My God, what episode, what adventure am I in here? Am I just fulfilling my master Abraham's wishes, which would be plenty in terms of the narrative of the story? But is God involved here? Is this just an accident that I ask and immediately the right person? Not only does she give more than she's asked, she does it with alacrity. Is the universe speaking here? Is God speaking here? I love that. And so the episode continues. Of course, her uncle, Rebecca's uncle, doesn't want to let her go. She says, "No, I'm going." He says, "Wait a little bit." She says, "I'm going." If we turn here to verse 62, the end of the episode. So Isaac had just come back from the vicinity of Be'er Lahai Roi, for he was settled in the region of the Negev. And Isaac went out walking in the field toward evening. Toward evening means just at the beginning of night. That's why Isaac is the kind of the model of mincha. Abraham gets up early in the morning, shachrit. Isaac in the evening of the day, mincha. Jacob at night wrestles, mariv. And the rabbis say that not only in the sacrificial worship do we have 3 sacrifices, but each is sponsored by one of the 3 patriarchs. A nice fanciful way of connecting, giving another justification for those 3 services. Verse 63, and Isaac went out walking in the field toward evening, and looking up, he saw camels approaching. So let's remember this. Isaac looked up and he saw camels. Raising her eyes, Rebekah saw Isaac. See, now to me, that is a special act of insight. Isaac has his mind on certain things, but Rebecca knows in what story she is about to participate. Raising her eyes, Rebecca saw Isaac. She alighted from the camel and said to the servant, "Who is that man walking in the field toward us?" And the servant said, "That's my master." So she took her veil and covered herself. So this is the origin of the bedecking ceremony before a wedding, where the bride veils herself. The servant told Isaac all the things that he had done. Isaac then brought her into the tent of his mother Sarah. Another poignant moment. And he took Rebekah as his wife. Isaac loved her. Notice, he took her and then he loved her. It's not he loved her and then he took her. Don't you see, this is, I don't want to make too much of this. This is not romance. This is destiny. This is the woman you need to marry. And if you come to love her, how much the better, right? I'm making something of it. I don't know that that's all there. Verse 67 again. Isaac then brought her into the tent of his mother. He took Rebekah as his wife. Isaac loved her and thus found comfort after his mother's death. Another poignant moment. Okay, so my claim here has been chapters 23 and 24 complete the arc begun in chapter 12. And there's Abraham on his own. Scott?
Just to add to your point earlier about Rebecca's alacrity, and also in 28, the maid ran to tell her gospel news. Right after that.
Yeah, very good, very good. Abrahamic. And I mean, like Abraham. No, I like that. I like that.
Yeah,
Yes.
I mean, thank you. That was a really interesting reading. I just want to think a little bit more about Isaac. I mean, it's very much Rebecca who's going to, let's say, take the reins. I think it's really interesting that Abraham does not send Isaac, but he sends the servant.
Nice.
And he's concerned that Isaac, if Isaac should go there, won't come back. I mean, it's explicit even in the text. And that's not really surprising, given what Isaac's gone through in chapter 22.
Yes.
Right? I mean, and there's a lot in the text that suggests at least uneasy relationships between father and son.
Okay, and certainly between Abraham and Sarah. That's a good point. Bernard? Bernard. Isaac, really, when you think about it, not too hard, basically plays the role in this story lying down. He's lying down on the altar in 22. At the end, you remember he's in bed dying, and his son Jacob comes to Esau comes to him, and Jacob comes to him. So in a certain sense, Isaac is a kind of recessive figure. So Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob needs, in the Avot prayer, the first prayer of the Amida, needs some explanation. One explanation is, don't ask, this is what we've always done. But we could ask, why is Isaac in there? And then generations. But in a certain way, Rebekah, in that generation, is the more important, forceful figure than Isaac. I mean, it's Rebekah who really gets Isaac to favor and bless the right son, because he wants to bless Esau. And that would have been catastrophic, just in the sense of Esau is not going to be a good carrier of the covenant, because what he's interested in is filling his belly and not in the covenant. So it's Rebekah that gets Isaac to finally bless Jacob and to see who the next son is. Rebekah is so crucial a figure. Do you want to follow that?
One other. It's very interesting that it's through burying Sarah that Abraham comes into possession of the land. So there's kind of a shift here in the text. The female characters become very important.
Oh, yes.
And I think there's also a connection between land and fertility.
Okay.
There, so we've buried Sarah there, and now Rebecca really becomes a key actor. I mean, Isaac is a very, as you've been saying, passive character in some ways.
That's a very good point.
Double observation about the importance of women there. And again,
Yeah.
the point you're making, there's a connection now in these two promises, fertility and land.
Yeah.
things are coming together.
No, I think that, I hadn't thought of that. These are not two separate promises, but
They're
they
coinciding.
coincide, right. Right, and over the years, we've spent considerable amount of time, what I always call the Bible's counter-narrative, and that is in a deeply patriarchal society, the women play very outsized role at crucial points. So it's Freud's notion, I might want to say, of the return of the repressed. Patriarchy suppresses women's role, voice, but the biblical author returns it to prominence. I mean, think about all the amazing women. Abigail, for example, who makes David do the right thing at a very key moment. She sort of saves his monarchy. Doris?
I think it's remarkable that after the Achaia, that Abraham has such presence of mind to be so responsible for those two things. I mean, he's at the end, or he feels he's at the end of his life. Turns out he's not. He's got many years ahead.
Yes.
And he feels so responsible for what he can do to guarantee those two promises.
Yeah.
It's rather extraordinary. Also extraordinary is that he's so prepared for each one. So with regard to the land, he knows real estate. He knows what real estate law is for the Hittites.
I love it.
He knows giving it away is not going to solve this issue for him. He knows he has to pay. He'll pay full price. It's a done deal.
Yeah.
And he knows with regard to progeny that, as Bernard said, he has a son who's lethargic, and we need succession beyond Isaac. He has, now, the other thing is working backwards with your ark. He's been responsible over and over again in all other instances.
Right.
From the get-go with the famine, right after the initial call is made. He knows enough about Egypt or a foreign territory that his wife will be attractive
Yeah.
and taken away. So he comes up with a plan. He has a contingency plan at every turn.
I love
He's
it.
a remarkable leader.
I love it.
One more thing, at the beginning, chapter 12, this is remarkable too. God calls and says, you need to relocate as my partner. And Abram doesn't even answer. He just relocates to a place he doesn't know.
And that's a sign of his faith, his strength.
Commitment, responsibility, faith, all wrapped up.
Well, those are really powerful points.
So backwards and forwards.
Yeah.
We see development going forwards, but if we retrace it backwards, it's interesting that he has a remarkable skill set as a leader
He really
all
does.
along.
No, that's great. You know, it's Robert Alter who has brought into prominence yet another way of reading the Bible, a literary understanding. So what literary devices is the author putting forward here, and not just theological and so on? And what Doris has suggested is that the author is an extremely talented narrator because he is prepared. I might say, just in terms of where we've ended up, I know this is not the fullness of the idea, that if we're going to believe what Abraham does in chapter 23 and 24, on his own, bringing the promises to fruition, we have to be prepared for his capacity to do this by previous actions. So Doris makes the point is not only do we see Abraham along this arc, but actually, if we want to see the what he does here already foreshadowed, so to speak. It's not just foreshadowing. These are episodes of their own in chapter 15 and 17. But that Abraham is a credible character when we move to what I'm calling these two climactic chapters. I think that's great. Carol?
All this discussion about Abraham and him taking charge, so to speak, it reminds me of the statement, act as though everything depends upon you, pray as though everything depends upon God.
I love it. Yeah, very good. Yeah. Who said that? You think it's attributable to somebody? Gosh. I mean, I'm glad to take credit for it.
Well, it's in the prayer book for one thing. It came before that.
Jim?
We spent a lot of time over the years talking about the binding of Isaac.
Yes.
But it's interesting that it comes right after Abraham's plea to God to spare the city of Sodom. He's so worried about all these people he doesn't even know,
Yeah.
but he doesn't seem to want to speak up to save his own son.
Yeah.
Which is contrary to every human nature we all have.
Yep.
I mean, I'm reasonably certain everybody in this room would do whatever they could to save their child.
Yep.
I know I would, and I know you all would.
Yep.
And it just, it throws kind of an arrow at all the character attributes we're trying to put on Abraham. And on top of all that, the emotional scars he's put on his son and his wife.
Yep.
There's a heck of a lot of negatives here that, in a way, to me, aren't quite believable.
So let me read something that Spicer says about this in his commentary. Was it then the aim of the story to extol obedience to God as a general principle? Abraham had already proved himself on that count by heeding the call to leave Mesopotamia and make a fresh start in an unknown land. The meaning of the present narrative, therefore, would have to be something more specific than heeding the call. And we can hardly go too far afield if we seek the significance of Abraham's supreme trial and the very quest on which he was embarked. The involvement of Isaac tends to bear this out, since the sole heir to the spiritual heritage concerned cannot but focus attention on the future. The process that Abraham set in motion was not to be accomplished in a single generation. It sprang from a vision that would have to be tested and validated over an incalculable span of time. A vision that could be pursued only with single-mindedness of purpose and absolute faith. You see what Spicer is driving at here? In other words, this becomes the model for what Abraham's generations are going to need in order to make it through the miasma of history. So I'm going to go back. The process that Abraham set in motion was not to be accomplished in a single generation. It sprang from a vision that would have to be tested and validated over an incalculable span of time, a vision that could be pursued only with single-mindedness of purpose and absolute faith. I think this is a response to Jim's point. This is so outrageous a demand that what is its point? And Spicer is saying it wants to raise the stakes of what it requires to make it through the course of history. And so the outrageousness of this demand by God and the willingness of Abraham to do it nevertheless becomes a model for what the Jewish people, I might say, is going to need in order to make it through all the tests that have beset us. A vision that could be pursued only with single-mindedness of purpose and absolute faith. An ideal that could not be perpetuated, an ideal of continuity, could not be perpetuated unless one is ready to die for it. or had the strength to see its stuff snuffed out. The object of the ordeal then, Spizer's saying, was to discover how firm was the patriarch's faith in the ultimate divine purpose. It was one thing to start out resolutely for the promised land. It was a very different thing to maintain confidence in the promise when all appeared lost. The fact is that short of such unswerving faith, the biblical process could not have survived the many trials that lay ahead. So, that's why Abraham is forced by the author to do it, to illustrate this, the firmness of Abraham's commitment. I mean, if you're a Kantian, if you believe that the highest mode of life is ethics, doing the right thing, then this becomes outrageous, because this is a murder. But if, as Kierkegaard wants to say, and he uses a fancy term, there are moments when we are forced to teleologically suspend the ethical. Teleology means, for the sake of a higher purpose, the ethical imperative, Kantian ethics, has to be suspended. Now, that's outrageous from an ethical point of view. But Kierkegaard's point is, something is higher than ethics. When God calls you, this suspends all of your ethical principles. And Kierkegaard knows that this is a risk. I mean, you're doing the wrong thing, but you're doing it for God. Kierkegaard has, in a way, acknowledged something about faith in extreme circumstances. Kant versus Kierkegaard. No, it's an interesting point. Is ethics the highest activity of human beings, or is faith? Margie.
I have a question for you. Because our text is sometimes economical in its language, it appears that Sarah and Isaac never speak to Abraham yet.
Right.
So what do the rabbis make of that? Do they tell Midrashim about it?
You know, I don't know for sure. I know Kierkegaard's view is he didn't tell Sarah because you can't communicate the power of what is revealed to you at that moment. So communication, when you get a call to do something from God, you can't communicate the power of that to you. You can't justify it in any other. What's he going to say to Sarah? So, according to Kierkegaard, it's not just as a matter of fact he didn't say something to Sarah, that the author has a deep understanding, this is Kierkegaard, of what it means to be called, not as, for Kant, to do the right thing is to assert the validity of a general principle. If I can show that lying leads to some real deep problems, then I can assert that I should not lie. As a general principle for Kant, my obligation in this moment derives from the generality of that principle. For Kierkegaard, it's the other way around. Generalities are about ethical behavior. When you're called by God, that is a particular thing that's just meant for you, and you can. This is Kierkegaard's Protestantism, by the way. The priesthood of every believer who could communicate with God. This is a deeply Protestant point, but his point is he didn't speak to Sarah because what was he going to say to her? He couldn't possibly convey the power of what was conveyed to him by God. This is religion. He makes a distinction between religion A and religion B. This is religion A. This is the real stuff. Oh, brother, I'm telling you, it's a whole world, isn't it? It's a whole world. I think we'll stop. Shabbat Shalom. I hope everybody has a great Thanksgiving. See what you got yourself into?
It's great, it's great, it's
Good.
just what I need.
Good, good, good. I'm glad.
3 quick points. First of all, Doris's point about Abraham's responsibility, I think answers your question about the dust and ashes comment. Right? He's saying to God, I'm just a man, but I have agency, and I can assert I'm responsible.
He
And
is
I'm
humble.
I'm not God, but that doesn't mean I'm powerless. And so I don't think there's any guile in that.
You don't think there's any guile in that? Okay, very good. He means it with an explanation. I am dust and ashes, but.
That doesn't mean I'm powerless. I'm your servant, and I can take action on my own in the plane in which I exist.
I love it. So this is a substantive point and not just
Unplug that.